Hello, my friend. Thank you for joining and have the courage to approach this topic of trauma. And trauma, this is an amazing definition that one of my teachers created. Trauma is defined not by the type of activity or experience, but it's defined by how somebody responds to what has happened. And you can think about any of those moments where you felt pain. That's like they could just be mini traumas, they could be traumas that felt intense pain, right? Then they're a bigger trauma. I know somebody wrote the other day, entrepreneurship is a trauma. Like the fears of going into this unknown world can be scary, and never knowing, is this business going to thrive? Do I have enough customers coming in? That until that business gets to a really, really high sustainable place, am I going to be offered what I need in order to live? My basic living things, right? That's one of the traumas that entrepreneurs go through. We think commonly of traumas like rape, like murder, like war, like abuse. And then you might see people in situations where you think, oh God, that's petty. Like that spoiled person is worried that that person was mean to them over there. And that meanness in that moment, hi Joe, thanks for joining. That meanness in that moment, though, their response to it might be a re-triggering of something that also happened in childhood, which maybe you can relate to a little bit more as a trauma that somebody should have emotions to. But I like to think about how many times I've seen people have an emotional reaction to something that I never have. But then I also think about times where I am reactive to something and I look at somebody else and it's a non-issue for them. So the amount of pain, the amount of trauma that somebody experiences is really about how we respond to it versus what it actually is. This is the first level of understanding that I wanted to give you. And you might think about the number of times that you experience these traumas, whether big or small, and the number of times that you interface with other people where it is coming up. And how are you going to work with that? How are you going to deal with that? Anytime that somebody seems emotionally reactive to somebody when it didn't seem like they should be, they're in a moment of trauma. That is a trauma moment. Deep down behind that is usually the question, am I going to be loved? So I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, I remember this moment where my dad must have been playing with one of my siblings and he wouldn't let me in. He wouldn't let me play. And I remember throwing the biggest temper tantrum. And then what definition did I create based on me not being included? Maybe that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy, that I didn't have good social skills, but behind that, that I wasn't loved. I wanted to know I'm loved in this moment. And my dad didn't realize, like, oh, I just need to let her know, that she's loved. So here I am, I go through my whole life creating all these definitions about myself and experiences that I was reactive to or experiences that I avoided because of that. And then as an adult, I asked my dad, I remember this moment. What was that to you? And he's like, oh my God, wait, I wanted to make sure that each of you had individual attention from me. That was one of the moments that I was giving to one of your siblings and not you. And oh my gosh, I never meant for you to not feel loved. And then he called me every day for the next week to say, I love you. Just to make sure, that I was reprogrammed in a new way with a different story and a different understanding of like, yes, I was loved. How different would my life be if I assumed at that young age that I was loved and that he was trying to give us all this personal attention, and so I was going to have my turn soon? What other choices and impacts, right, would I have made along the road? How many times would I have been less reactive to certain situations if I had made that definition from a young age? But I actually believe that there's some choice in there, right? And that there was a part of me that wanted to go through life having the experience, you could say, of not feeling loved, of feeling like I don't know how to be friends with people, so that I could learn to give myself that confidence and that love, because that's what happened as a result, which created a much more empowered person than if I didn't create that story from the beginning. And the reason why I say this is because we want to remove judgment as to the choices that people are making, to how they respond, and when it seems like they don't have a choice because they developed a trigger patterning from a young age, to have more understanding and empathy for that. And when a trauma is coming up in yourself, when it is coming up in someone else, when somebody's reacting emotionally, when it's unreasonable, you don't know why they're acting this way, it doesn't seem like they should be, they're responding to past trauma. So the first step is just really look at where you are. Because a lot of times, again, people want to be loved, so you can send them love. And people want to be seen. Like, oh, this is the emotion you're experiencing right now. It doesn't mean that you need to feel that emotion. So here's the difference, right? If you're very empathic, then you tend to start feeling what somebody else is feeling. But you can train yourself to notice and acknowledge and offer understanding and empathy without, you could say, sympathizing. Sometimes is the difference, whereas sympathy is you start to feel what they feel. So you don't have to go into the sympathy. You don't have to feel what they feel. You don't have to jump into the well, into the hole or the ditch with them. You can be at the top and say, okay, I notice you and what you're feeling right now. But then it's like, well, do you want me to throw you a ladder, a rope, leave you alone? And it might be, yeah, I want to stay here longer because actually experiencing this feeling gives me some sense of value. This is important to acknowledge because if you complain, if you notice somebody else complaining, that's when you're not being in acceptance with where you actually want to be. Either staying there longer to learn from it or ready to move on and haven't come up with the right solution yet. So that's where you get more creative. That's where you get to come check in with people like me who can help you through coaching, get to those results that you're looking for. But you get to ask somebody, it's like, well, where do you want to go? What type of support do you want? And then you figure out, well, do I have a ladder? It's like, yes, I want a ladder. Well, do I have a ladder that I could throw them? Like, no, but I have this other friend who has a ladder, who can throw you the ladder. So I'll connect you with that friend. So you don't have to give somebody what they're asking, right? If they say, hey, I want you to come in here into the well with me, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. Sometimes they just want other people to come into the well with them because they want more validation of what they're experiencing and feeling. So all you need to do is validate and say, hey, I see what you're feeling, and you're totally fine. Like, it's totally fine that you feel that. If you can learn to love them, despite where they are. And it doesn't mean you have to keep hearing the complaints. You have to do anything to deal with the situation. But people want to know too that if I have this much trauma that I'm bringing up in front of you, will you still love me? You can always send love to somebody, even if you don't love the way that they're acting. That's the variation. And typically, what I'm going to say is when we want to withdraw is because we don't know how to handle what they're going through. And that's where you say, okay, well, I don't know how to throw you a ladder, but I know somebody else who does. So you don't even have to have the ability to handle what's coming up with somebody else to deal with it. I loved this because a friend of mine, I just find him so challenging, and he wanted to date me at some point. And I'm like, I really just don't know how to handle all the things that come up for him. And he recently started dating somebody who is just totally at peace and fine with all of those things coming up for him. And it's kind of knowing this now, it's like, oh, well, no, I can't be the one to date you. But I can help you find somebody else who doesn't get fazed by all of these things that are coming up for you. It's in their nature to be absolutely fine with that. I've been sharing a bit. Why don't you also share in the chat what helps you when you're in the moment of trauma? What do you feel like you need in those moments? What have you noticed has helped other people when they're in the moment of trauma? And then just to recap, what I was saying here is the first is having some sense of empathy or understanding without necessarily needing to feel what somebody's feeling, but really noticing where somebody is at and then giving them space to decide where they want to go and giving yourself space to decide, where do I mesh with that? How can I support them with where they want to go, with who I am right now, and with what's going on in my life? A little secret, so those of you who do want that extra support, want someone to help throw you the ladder, because that's pretty much what I do as part of coaching, then just message me and we can connect. And you can even, if you're really ready to take action, then go to talkwithavital.com. There's a form there for you to fill out, so that'll help you get clear on where you are and where you want to go. And then you'll actually get a free 15-minute discovery session where we can break down what's the best, you could say, ladder to throw you, right? What's the best plan for that? And then if there's a way that I can support you going forward, then we'll be able to do that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to share what your comments and feedback is and share this with other people so that we can all figure out how to help throw someone a ladder when they're in the well and they're in a space of trauma. And think about how to apply this to your own self and how to throw that ladder for your own self. Blessings.